For years, gamers have speculated the possibility of Valve reigniting the Half-Life franchise by developing Half-Life 3. Everyone wants it, everyone needs it. Some believe it's a fantastical dream conjured by years of glue-sniffing delusion. Others cling to hope like a desperate koala as its favourite gum tree is swept down a tumultuous river. Since Episode 2's release in 2007, yeah, that long ago, Valve have been content to sit on their hands and warm them with the flatulent eruptions of wealth from Steam's success. Is it surprising that someone else wound up doing their work for them? Enter Abiotic Factor, a cozy indie game developed by Deep Field Games, the small team responsible for Unfortunate Spacemen.
So, ready for your first day?
It's clear from the promotional art, the environmental design, the texturing, the character models, the setting, the premise, and the numerous references that Abiotic Factor is heavily inspired by Valve's 1998 shooter. That'd be enough to sell some people, but Abiotic Factor is more than a Half-Life clone. There are minor spoilers ahead, mostly for items and enemies, but if I couldn't show you the cool stuff, then you'd have no reason to buy this game, would you? The premise is familiar to shooter veterans. You're a fresh-faced scientist arriving for your first day on the job at a secret underground facility. I'm sure you can guess the rest. Unlike Half-Life's pedestrian intro sequence, the proverbial is already hitting the fan as players enter the facility. This is gleaned from the amusing induction fill-in, who's only too happy to send you into a burgeoning crisis like it's a regular day on the job.
Feel free to mosey. I've gotta check some stuff out. We got some weird crap going on today, not gonna lie to you.
After a brief tutorial, players are sent down to the cafeteria where the tables sit empty and the doors are locked, and it's here where the insidious tendrils of panic creep in. Abiotic Factor is a crafting survival game. Don't you click away, I see you. Hear me out first. This game will be a gateway for many who don't normally jive with survival games. Mark my words. Abiotic Factor is a story-driven game, but the early hours are consumed by thoughts of food, clean water, sleep, and somewhere to squeeze out a long one while doom-scrolling on Twitter. The tension of survival nips at players and helps drive them through early exploration. All the survival tropes are here: crafting, cooking, hydration, sleep, agriculture. But Abiotic Factor has additional concerns, which include fractured and broken bones, radiation, infections, temperature, and events like base assaults. Cooking is particularly arcane. There's no mystery in preparing a slab of alien tenderloin, but soups are largely trial and error and often result in slop that makes your toilet whimper. Exotic recipes bestow buffs, which is a great incentive to experiment, and players may stumble across recipes and emails, which is a neat world-building touch. Clean drinking water is another primary concern. Fountains and water features provide an endless supply, but they're contaminated and make players sick. Water coolers are everywhere, and while finite, they can be moved. It took me an embarrassing amount of time to discover the trick for getting clean water, which didn't involve hoarding water coolers like a prized collection of pop vinyls. Unlike Mr. Freeman, these scientists are true pencil necks, not John Mullins from Soldier of Fortune. Early combat is clumsy and desperate, and confined to the most rudimentary of bludgeoning and stabbing devices. Some weapons can't be used at all. Players can offset this clumsiness a little at character creation by choosing predetermined roles or a custom set of skills. But survival is learned, and part of Abiotic Factor's appeal is taking a scrawny lad coat from Zero to Sam Fisher over the course of a playthrough. Performing actions earns XP for an associated skill, with additional perks and abilities unlocked at specific skill levels. Some skills, such as strength and running, also improve carry weight and speed with each level. The sense of earned progression grows in lockstep with the trials of the player. I had stunning moments of clarity while looting or fighting enemies where I realized that myself and my character were competently tackling situations which had felt hard hours earlier. Finding new material unlocks crafting ideas, and there's a goofy brainstorming minigame where matching the right components to an idea unlocks a crafting recipe. There's no penalty for incorrect guesses. Players guess until the right components are selected. This initially felt like busy work, but the charm of a scientist brainstorming new devices grew on me and helped reinforce the theme. Discovery is a core appeal of crafting games. I won't spoil much for this preview because I'd be stealing the win from your sales, but the tools players craft become much more sophisticated than office stationery cobbled together with spit and strong language. All is right in the world when your big-brained character MacGyvers a crossbow from chair legs and rubber bands, then later crafts tech which would make the T-1000 jealous. Recipes are pragmatic and thematic, and I love the thought which has gone into them. As with other survival games, the items which players unlock in Abiotic Factor make navigation, combat, and many aspects of survival easier. Even the most mundane of discoveries can be a big deal, saving time on repetitive tasks, making some activities more efficient, and generally easing the strain of being an outnumbered cave dweller. Encounters are fun thanks to the utilitarian yet versatile tools at the player's disposal. Coupled with fantastic map design, players have options which extend far beyond singular items. The small creatures, aptly named pests, pose little danger and make for an easy meal. But the challenge drums up, with faster, more tenacious aliens appearing who pursue and harry players. And because Half-Life is the inspiration, it'd be remiss of me not to introduce Abiotic Factor's Pest, Carbuncle, Exor, and Soldier. That's just a sample. Fighting these aliens head-on is always a bloodbath that isn't easily won with an iron pipe and balls of steel. Exploiting enemy weaknesses will make fights easier, but there are other options. Stealth functions well enough within the context of the setting. It won't blow the crowns off a GDC crowd, but it's there, it's viable, and it's necessary at times. Stealth is great for circumventing encounters, but it's also used to get the drop on enemies for a sneak attack. The need for discretion felt, at times, like creeping through the eerie hallways of the Von Braun in System Shock 2, and some of Abiotic Factor's environments and backing tracks heightened this feeling. Both games share a tension and character fragility, though they're less prevalent in Abiotic Factor as players can go toe-to-toe with many enemies, and resources are generous, unlike System Shock 2's punishing grip on supplies. By far, the greatest strength of combat is the freedom to experiment. Enemies can be ambushed, sniped from vantage points, or even goaded into traps. I have to demonstrate this because it's so cool. At a certain point, I learned to craft the Tesla coil, which is categorized as a base defense item. Having already passed innumerable power points in my travels, I decided to bring a Tesla coil on my adventures and try luring enemies to it to save on ammo. Not a foolproof plan. I am indeed a fool. But it worked remarkably well, and Charcoal Militant became the go-to strategy for a while. I thought outside the box for a solution to my problem and felt like a genius when it panned out. And that's one example from my playthrough. There are many toys and potential strategies waiting to be discovered, waiting for you to feel like a genius too. I love when games have systems which reward and encourage emergent gameplay. It's this freedom which draws me to ImSims like an Aussie to a Tim Tam. You might be getting that tickle in the nether region that Abiotic Factor has ImSim qualities, and you'd be right. Be still, my throbbing loins. The DNA is here, and options broaden the further players progress. Open areas encourage creative traversal, whether it's discovering alternate paths or crafting your own route from available materials. There was one area, a certain isolated tower in the Hydro Dam, which I'm fairly certain I got into without using the intended path. Again, that's one example. This flexibility is not only awesome, it's welcome, particularly when encountering the militant zealots who are capable of more than a bite of the ankles. These soldiers offer the first real resistance, and stealth and ingenuity are rewarded, even after players upgrade their arsenal. That's not to say that players can't shoot their way through, but the cost is higher. Crafting progression is incredibly well paced. The Cascade facility is split into distinct regions, each with a unique theme. Unlike biomes in other crafting survival games, each consecutive region is progressive, adding to the material drops rather than restricting them. This results in material always being available. Abiotic Factor rarely forces players to backtrack to gather what they need. Surprises are also tucked away, rewarding an explorer's curiosity. I frequently cleaned out an area and wondered if I had seen everything, only to find a new material moments later which unlocked more crafting recipes. The pacing of progression is almost perfect. A steady feed of new stuff and the cadence of discovery keep Abiotic Factor lively throughout the entire game. Resources are found inside crates, by dismantling objects, and as loose items like a stapler or stack of paper on a desk. Deepfield have nailed the dopamine of busting stuff in a shower of loot. Crates are everywhere, and their shape and colour indicate, at a glance, what they likely contain. They're the loot boxes of the crafting game, disgorging their booty after a few solid whacks with a cough of splintered wood. While crates are undoubtedly a nod to Half-Life, they provide a plausible source of the gear necessary for survival. And hey, tell me this isn't cathartic.
We got a lot of crates.
Resources occasionally respawn in places, but the quantity and frequency are so low that spawns can't be relied on to restock. It is possible for players to squander resources and find themselves in a tough spot. Rather, it would be possible, if not for clever design. Deepfield anticipated this problem and added replenishable sources for all basic components. Item vendors, found at key locations, trade some items for others. Enemies respawn every in-game day, and some also drop basic components. That isn't to say that there aren't enough materials lying around. There are crap loads, more than a solo player would ever need to conquer the multiverse. But there's a way to collect materials when the crates are smashed and players find themselves short. Even exotic materials aren't finite and can be farmed in specific ways. Huge props to the dev team for this foresight. Abiotic Factor's maps must have been crafted by veterans. Areas are logically and organically laid out, with staff offices and break rooms feeling as though they have purpose in the cavernous maze of Cascade facility. The Half-Life influence is palpable in the themes and texturing, with many spaces feeling as though a familiar Black Mesa corridor is around the next corner. This feeling never disappears, despite Abiotic Factor's unique identity. This quaint aura which coats much of Abiotic Factor will appeal to many who yearn for the best of what the late 90s and early aughts had to offer. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Many doors in each region are initially locked, which funnels players to the important discoveries. Inevitably, through exploration, players reach the other side of a locked door and can unlock it to create shortcuts. The shortcuts are generously spaced, thoughtfully placed, and important to Abiotic Factor's flow. As night approaches, players are encouraged to return to base. The shortcuts allow players to pick up where they left off, which contributes to the pleasing flow of progression. It's fantastic design, agreeing that players shouldn't have to slog through the same fights over and over. This respect for the player's time is a key insight into the expectation that Deepfield have for the progress and enjoyment of Abiotic Factor. This flow becomes even easier after a certain discovery, allowing players to spend every precious second exploring. Exploration isn't confined to the Cascade facility. Portals offer access to a multitude of what the game calls antiverses. Whether it's alien landscapes reminiscent of Zen from Half-Life, or locations with a more Terran quality, these areas present the exciting possibility to find exotic materials and to learn more about what's going on. All are unique and fun, but Flat Hill is a standout experience. An unnatural fog blankets the town, and something large lurks in the mist, forcing players into a deadly game of cat and mouse. I got Silent Hill and The Mist vibes while exploring this area. I could be wrong, but there may also be some Stanisław Lem in the Crush Depth content. The nature of the setting allows incredible narrative flexibility, which ranges from alien worlds to strange earthen locales and even folklore. Deepfield have carte blanche to take this narrative wherever they please, and they're doing so in interesting ways. These portal worlds are also the master key to resource collection, as the worlds reset every few days, spawning more stuff to grab. Portals are a fail-safe, a way to stop players from running out of resources. There's even an announcement over the intercom when portal worlds reset, ensuring that players always know when the bounty is replenished. It's a clever system which gets a tip of the glass from Blondie. The facility is huge, far eclipsing my expectation, especially for an indie game. There are countless rooms, nooks and vents, which players aren't required to visit, but to which exploration is handsomely rewarded with resources, lore, and new discoveries. Players leave a lot on the table by only focusing on the main objectives, and they're doing the game a disservice in ignoring the broader facility. The sheer breadth of Cascade is often revealed through distant locations or a glimpse through the bulletproof glass of a security gate. It's impressive that most of these areas can be reached. There's little geometric fluff in Abiotic Factor. The experience distills into an addicting loop of exploration, resource collection, combat, then returning to base as night approaches to craft freshly discovered recipes. An in-game day lasts around 20 minutes, which breaks excursions into digestible chunks. I easily fell into the pattern of one more day, then I'll go to bed, as Abiotic Factor drew me deeper into its intriguing world, and what began as a relaxing evening plundering an underground facility was rudely shattered by the morning sun flashing through the gap in my blinds. Abiotic Factor is a story-driven game, leading players through the labyrinth of concrete, stone, and steel as they hunt for a way to the surface and escape. Surprisingly, there's a cast of NPCs to speak with. Some move through the facility with player progress, appearing in new regions as they attempt their own escape. They flesh out the greatest struggle of scientists versus aliens and orient players toward the next objective. Don't expect them to fight for you though. The game's story and lore is spread across countless emails and the holographic logs of Cascade Facility Director Derek Mance. There's some great humour here, subtle at times. Yellow paint anyone? But the conversations are believable and well written. The emails shy from the admittedly nostalgic but asinine "I changed the code on the door to 0451, and instead detail life inside the facility and lay bare the curiosity, awe, and angst of the staff who work there. We don't get anything as cool as a gradual reveal of the Dungeons & Dragons game of Prey 2017, but the prose is nuanced and worth reading. The voice talent is rough, aside from Derek Mance, who is played by professional voice actor Jonathan Davis, according to the Abiotic Factor wiki. Considering that Mance has gravitas and that he delivers much of the meaningful prose, it was a wise decision to recruit a pro for the role because it makes Cascade's plight more believable. Abiotic Factor can be played solo, but can also host up to 6 players, ensuring that players have someone to fling their bagged crap at. Co-op is a chaotic blast. Will your team split up to cover more ground? Will your team focus on different roles? Or will it all be a hot mess? Many skills synergize with a group of survivors, encouraging players to rope in their buds for a good time eating raw spuds, crapping into Ziploc bags, and battling the subterranean chill. As you see in the footage, we opted for a hot mess, not a choice so much as the default mode of play. Abiotic Factor has great quality of life features, which dissolve the barriers some may have with crafting survival games. Crafting recipes can be pinned to the HUD, which makes gathering components for them easier. The components required for each pinned recipe are also highlighted, making them easy to spot in storage or the inventory. This sounds like a small detail, and it is, but it removes an important barrier to the enjoyment of crafting games. I have hundreds of hours in Valheim, another crafting survival game, and I wish it had these features. I've lost count the number of times I memorized a component list only to come up short or even bring the wrong components. It's frustrating, it's frequent, and it compounds over time. Abiotic Factor makes it clear that it wants you to have a good time by focusing on the cool stuff and removing the unnecessary busy work. Recipes aren't bloated with unrealistic requirements, and only the more exotic recipes may require a special trip to collect that one uncommon component. Other quality of life additions revolve around crafting recipes, and an acknowledgement that players are expected to initially juggle a bunch of manual tasks. Crafting recipes streamline or gradually drum out repetitive tasks, which reduces the cost of expeditions, stash management, and survival, both in time and resources. You might argue that these are less quality of life and more crafting progression. I'll use another Valheim example since it's top of mind. Growing crops in Valheim is a fundamental component of progression. Veggies are used to make foods which boost the amount of health and stamina players have. They're a staple of progress as enemies hit harder and can take more damage with each new biome. To farm enough veggies to sustain exploration, you need to plant, seed, or harvest every few days, and this process takes a while. It never gets easier or quicker. There are no upgrades to aid in this laborious chore. Abiotic Factor's food requirements are less demanding, and there are multiple upgrades to boost crop growth, which makes this work much nicer to do. You never need to take a chunk of valuable game time to play the green thumb. My lone gripe with Abiotic Factor is that you can't add pins to maps. There are many points of interest to discover, and some are worth returning to, but without pins you have to memorize where they are and how to get there. This is cumbersome, as critical resources are tied to some locations, and navigating back to them is tricky in the confusing maze of passages. A minor gripe, but worth pointing out. I found no bugs, crashes, or frame drops during my playthrough. There are some weird issues like characters not animating properly, and this guard who yearned to be one with the stars. May his soul find peace up there. These are negligible though, and don't break the game or hurt the experience. It's hard to believe that this game is in early access. There's so much here, and for a reasonable $36 dues. You'll pay 3 times as much for a quadruple-A premium tier experience, which has 1/3 the enjoyment, if I'm generous. Not only that, but Abiotic Factor is feature complete. Each region is fully fleshed out, nothing is missing. Sure, they may add or change features, such as the addition of an item trader near the starting area after the recent Crush Depth update, but these tweaks are merely adjustments to feedback and to balance the additional content. Abiotic Factor distills the crafting survival paradigm into its most enjoyable elements, and is exemplar of why indie games are the future of this industry. It has an engrossing and addictive gameplay loop, there's a ton of content for a bargain price, and, most relevant these days, it's feature complete. All from a game in early access. Abiotic Factor isn't only an easy recommend for crafting survival fans, it'll also scratch the ImSim itch in ways you likely haven't scratched in a long while. This will be a gateway game for many who normally turn their nose up at crafting survival games, I guarantee it. The story elements are fun without being overly goofy, and there's a surprising variance in locales for an underground facility, all with those cozy Half-Life vibes. Abiotic Factor reminds me why I fell in love with gaming. Give it a chance and it may do the same for you. I realize that I sound like a salesman. This isn't a sponsored preview, no one asked me to make this video. Good games deserve attention, and this one deserves yours, if nothing else. Tell your friends. There's a link to Abiotic Factor's Steam page in the description. Hope you guys make it to GOG one day. Don't miss the next video where I'll cover another lesser known game which was, thanks to its moment-to-moment gameplay, the best game I played in 2023. That one will be a banger, so stick around. A fistful of thank yous to my patrons and locals who support my work and who brought you this video. You guys are the whiskey in this cowboy's glass. I drink of you, and I drink to you. There's a link to my long play channel, Blondfire, in the description, if that's your poison. I recently finished a Valheim long play, and there are 2 seasons of Stalker Anomaly ready for your peepers. If you enjoyed this video, then crowbar the like button. If you really like my style, subscribe to the channel. And, if you'd be so kind, replicate the Blondie experience. Drop it through the countless portals of the expansive antiverse. Expose as much of the universe, parallel or otherwise, to my videos as possible. Remember the cant. Until next video, partners.
Where's the...